He's sending us live right now.
Okay, do you want me so I can go? No.
All right, we're live. We can go.
So welcome, everyone. This is a great turnout. We weren't quite sure what you were going to get tonight, and we're really happy that you're here. This is a big and heavy topic, and so we're gonna learn a lot tonight from our special guests. To lighten things up, we do have a hot cocoa bar and tea and some cookies over there. So if you want to partake, please do. I know it's not as cold out as we were expecting, which is happy for some of you and probably a bummer for others. So, but please partake. And I'll introduce myself first. My name is Rebecca Seaton. I am a member of Community of Concern. And we're a group of parents at the high school and middle schools that work on raising awareness and educating about youth mental health and wellness. So we've arranged and put this, organized this event for you tonight. And we didn't do the heavy work. I have to say that goes to the speakers who are going to be sharing this information with you. But we did help get it together. And we are really excited for you to be here. I want to tell you just in terms of housekeeping that the emergency exits are that way if we need them, and then the bathroom is go through the doors and take a right and all the way down at the hall where you came in the entrance. There's a bathroom right next to that. You can see we are recording tonight. I'll be able to send you the recording and some resources if you have signed up on the sign-up sheets out front, and if you didn't get a chance to, please do that before you go tonight. We do also have some resources for you on this table. There's going to be a handout that has some information from what you'll learn tonight, including some resources of therapeutic services in West Hartford and the area. There's also some other handouts from those local agencies that you'll see over there. Please take what you want from that. So, without further ado, I am going to introduce the first speaker of tonight, and she's going to introduce the rest of the panel. But starting us off is going to be Shauna Rackmill. And Shauna is a licensed clinical and school social worker. She has psychiatric clinical work in hospitals and emergency clinics. She is the crisis clinician at Conard, and she's also the advisor of the SAVE Club, which is a student club that works on raising awareness about youth mental health and wellness at school. So with that, I'll turn it over to Shauna.
Thank you so much, everyone, for being here on such an important night. I think this is a very important topic that the more people that learn and have an understanding around mental health, how it impacts people in different ways, and being able to recognize the signs early and get support is so important. So I want to say thank you for organizing this and for being here. And we do want to thank Community of Concern, who without them this wouldn't have been pulled together tonight, and the West Hartford Public Schools also, who has made this possible. So we're really happy to have been able to combine forces and do the much we can for the community. Okay, I'm Shauna Rackmill, your presenter. And then we have 4 panelists. They're a little bit out of order. But first we have Melinda Calhoun. She is a speech and language pathologist here at Conard, and she is also the advisor to the Gender and Sexuality Alliance group. And she does a lot of great things with that group. Next, we have Melanie Thomas. She works at both high schools as a department supervisor for all of the school counseling. And over here, we have Jeffrey Ambrose, who is not only a clinician, but also the clinical director at Courage Counseling Center. and his wife, who is another administrator in the district, Kim Ambrose. She was the former Hall assistant principal, and now she is the interim principal at Brayburn. And I also want to mention we have another administrator in the building. Over here we have Jocelyn Tamborella Noble, who is an assistant principal here at Conard. So let's give everybody a round of applause. So, stress, anxiety, and depression. This is what adolescence looks like. Whether it's work, whether it's books, whether it's writing a paper, whether it's being busy on your cell phone, overwhelmed, or just having so much social media coming at you, it is all can be very overwhelming. So what is typical? Because all kids have some levels of anxiety and depression. It is normal for kids to feel sad, angry, or moody at times. But when a sad or bad mood lasts for weeks, months, or even longer, and when it affects the child's ability to do well in school, to do well in the community, and to do well at home or with peers, it might be depression. Which one of these kids struggles with depression? Can anybody in the audience tell? Depression is often invisible to a lot of people, especially teenagers tend to keep it much more hidden, and it is hard to know who is struggling inside from looking on the outside. Okay, some statistics. In 1990, the CDC started calculating youth risk behavior across the country. And so when they do that, about every 10 years or so, they are doing national-wide surveys, which is called the Youth Risk Behavior Survey System. And so this goes back to 1990. Right now, most current data that we have is from the survey conducted in 2019. Since the pandemic, they have not been able to do an updated survey, which is the main CDC survey, but other places have. So looking at some of the statistics that we have, 1 in 6 kids experience a mental health disorder this year, which means that of that picture we saw, who of these kids has an issue, at least one of them, maybe even 2. Teen suicide rates have increased quite a bit in the past decade. So again, the CDC Youth Risk Behavior Survey System was able to identify between 2007 and 2017 a 56% increase in suicide rates among teens, ages 10 through 19. And that's been a big risk. That increase increased a little bit more in 2019, with 2019 ending with a huge jump within 1 month after the show 13 Reasons Why came out. There was a 29% jump in suicides the month after that came out. And then we went into the pandemic. So before we get into the pandemic numbers, 59% of youth in the US have a major mental health history of depression and do not receive treatment. That is more than 50% of kids not receiving treatment that have major mental health. 50% of all lifetime mental illnesses begin around age 14. So that is when you want to work and look out for your kids and be aware of what's going on so that you are able to support them. Around age 14 is when stuff starts to come out, and you want to make sure you're providing them the resources needed. So more recently, in a survey taken shortly after the pandemic, says 30 7% of high school students reported poor mental health during the pandemic. And currently, the most current rates we have post-pandemic among 11 to 17-year-olds are still 9% higher than pre-pandemic rates. Does anybody have an idea why the rates might have increased almost or more than 50% in the past decade, pre the pandemic? So there is no definite answer for this, but one theory is around media. So not just social media, but other media. And that kids are exposed to a lot more violence from TV shows, from movies, from video games, and what becomes more natural, whether it's suicide or other kinds of violence, kids have become more numb to it. Social media has also created a great deal of stress for all people, but particularly for children. So for adolescents wanting to fit in, wanting to feel the same, wanting to be as beautiful as, social media has really made a negative impact in a lot of kids' lives. And unlike other teen issues that generations and generations have dealt with, parents of this generation are coming up against something new, which is dealing with technology. Before then, your parents and their grandparents dealt with teen issues, relationships, breakup, going to school, bad grades, friendships, not liking a teacher. All of these are typical teen things that generations have known and dealt with. Social media is something brand new to this world, and parents have not necessarily all figured out, we have not all figured out how to navigate it perfectly yet, so it's hard to teach our children when we're still learning. And we have a little video here to help understand.
Depression, it's sort of a way of functioning. It's an illness. It's part of science. You can't really get rid of it. There's so much about depression that is still not understood.
This does exist, and it is a thing.
I suffered from depression since I was 13 years old.
I was around 19.
15, 13,
14. 13. 14. My depression really kicked in.
I didn't know what depression was. I'm not sure if I had even heard about it. I just knew that I felt different within myself.
I felt like a bit of an outcast. I felt like I wasn't normal. How can I put it? It's kind of like ivy. It's like ivy. You know, you can cut it off here, but it grows back up there.
You don't know when or how it's going to hit, but sometimes it does, and the hardest bit is just keeping going.
You feel like there is nothing in the world that's going to make you better, and you feel as though there's just no point. You can see people around you that love you and how much they love you, but you can't feel any of that love. It's crippling sometimes. For a lot of people, there is still a stigma.
I think the misconceptions about it is that it affects everyone in the same way. Not only is it a stigma in the non-Muslim community, there's also a huge stigma in the Muslim community.
In my community, if you have a mental health issue, this is not normal.
You know, in the African and Caribbean cultures, you just have to kind of get on with life.
Sometimes people tell you to just think of life differently, just be happy, but it doesn't work like that.
You don't want to feel like it's the only thing that can describe you. I'd be really, really upset if people start to stroke my hair and go, oh no, poor you know. Whereas if they took me out and called me an idiot, I'd be the happiest man on earth.
We just want people to listen to us and not really judge us.
Sometimes just being in the same room as friends and loved ones has been enough to help me a little bit.
And offer emotional guidance and support.
To have someone just say, I'm here if you need anything, that for me made all the difference.
I wouldn't be who I am without depression, and I love the person I am. I never thought I'd say that.
Depression, it's sort of a way.
Okay, and here are our panelists again. We are going to start to hear from each of them. We're going to start with Melinda Calhoun, and I'm going to bring the mic over. So the next slide talks a little bit about the extremely high rates among the LGBTQIA community and the severity of differences, how that has impacted them with depression, how depression has been more serious. And I'm going to let Melinda share some of this information and also some of her own personal experience.
All right. Hello. Good evening. I have some very alarming statistics to share with you. Okay. So within the LGBTQIA plus community, this is very high risk for depression, suicide, as well as suicidal ideation. So and just as Ms. Rackmill was mentioning that with the pandemic, these numbers have increased. These numbers have very much increased within this community as well. And so 40% of high school students who identify as gay, lesbian, bisexual, or questioning, so that's not even the whole LGBTQIA+, have seriously considered suicide. These folks are 3.5 times more likely to attempt suicide, and specifically with transgender youth, these rates are much higher. So they were 5.87 times more likely to attempt suicide, and 6.5 experience suicidal ideation. I do not like reading these, but this is the shocking truth of what our kids are going through. These youth are 140% more likely to skip school due to bullying or threats, and 6 times more likely to experience depression. Within the year of 2019, we have a comparison of 6% of heterosexual youths compared to 23% of gay, queer youth who attempted suicide. So this is a very high-risk population. And I'm going to share with you a little bit of information about my experience. I do not typically speak in front of strangers, so I prepared a statement tonight just to help me be a little bit less nervous. All right, here we go. Okay. So I want to start off by saying that I am just one person. I cannot speak for the entire LGBTQIA+ community. I'm going to try my best to speak from my personal experience as a queer person who was born in 1990 and grew up in a mostly accepting family. I'm also going to provide a few key pieces of advice to those who seek to be better allies. Okay, so talking about teenagers and youth, what I really, really want to talk about today is the experience of coming out. And coming out is not a one-time thing. If a person chooses to be open about their identity, they could potentially come out to every single person in their life. It is not uncommon for preteens and teenagers to come out to their friends before coming out to family members. I personally started coming out to my friend group when I was around 13 or 14, and I did not come out to my parents until I was 18 and a freshman in college. The thing is, no matter how well you know someone, you do not know how they're going to respond until it actually happens. And so for me, in my family, I had no reason to believe that there would be a negative reaction. My best friend is gay, and in high school he was open and out to my parents, and there were absolutely no issues there. They loved him. But when I came out to my dad, this one went okay. He said, okay, that's cool. My mom was a little different though. So my mom, on the other hand, said, I've been wanting to talk to you about this. Your father and I had a gay friend, and I know the signs, and you're not gay, and you're not bisexual. That was rough. For those of you who are unsure why that wasn't a great response, I'm going to run through it pretty quickly. So, if you have met one gay person, you do not know everything about every person in the LGBTQIA+ community. There are no specific signs that are consistent and accurate. Also, it's not great to tell someone that they are wrong when they open up to you about who they are. As a bisexual person, I cannot tell you how many times I've been told that I'm just going through a phase and that I'm actually straight. Here I am at 32, and I've been married to my wife for over 2 years. It wasn't a phase. The point that I want to get across is this, that when your child or your friend or your nephew or your cousin or whoever, when they tell you who they are, I want you to recognize that you have an opportunity, an incredible opportunity to connect with them. I encourage you to respond with tenderness and care. I also want to caution you that they will be paying attention to how you react when they tell you. When a person comes out, they know that they are taking a risk that might impact how others feel about and treat them. And I'm sure that you're well aware that there are many places, many homes in our very country where it is not safe at all for a person from the LGBTQIA+ community to be their authentic selves. It can also take a lot of courage to come out to friends, especially for a preteen or a teenager. When I was a senior in high school, I got a call on my cell phone from a blocked number, and I picked it up. It was a girl from my school who was a couple years younger than me, and she absolutely refused to tell me her name. She knew about me as someone who was open about my sexuality and wanted someone to talk to. Her main concern was that she was terrified of telling her friend group that she was a lesbian. Their friendship meant a lot to her, and she was scared that they would turn on her. So even in social circles that seem familiar and comfortable, there is still a risk that's taken when a person comes out. For parents, for the parents out there, for the guardians out there, I want to suggest that even if you think that it's obvious to your kids that you will love and care for them, no matter what their sexual orientation or gender identity is, I think that you should tell them that explicitly. Open the line of communication. Also, I want to make you aware that the Q in LGBTQIA+ doesn't just stand for queer, it stands for questioning. And it might take some time for an individual to sort out their understanding of themselves and their identity. Within the LGBTQIA+ community, there's generally an understanding that one can refine how they define their identity as they learn more about themselves. Thank you for your time, and thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Melinda, for sharing that very personal experience with us. I think that's very helpful. One of the takeaways that I can hear from that is to accept your kids who they are, as they are, in their authentic self, whether you agree, disagree with their particular beliefs. When kids don't feel accepted is when depression happens, and sometimes worse cases. Also, one of the riskiest times for anybody in the LGBTQ community is around the time that they come out. So when somebody comes out, if they get rejections, a lot of rejections, it can absolutely lead to an increase in suicidal ideation and or attempts. So it's really important to accept each and every person as they are. And next, we're going to go to Kim. Oh, no, yeah, we can stay there and we'll go to Kim. And so, Kim, I'm hoping you can share with us as a Cuban American what some of your experiences have been and how that has impacted getting mental health care and the view within various communities that you've experienced around mental health.
Thank you, Shauna, for putting this together and for our community of concerns and for our speakers and everyone for being here this evening. I have my notes as well as my, what I'm sharing is dear to my heart. So I want to make sure that I can share that well with all of you too. But, I am a leader that leads with equity and access, right? And my background is being multilingual and multicultural, right? So that helps me understand the unique needs of our diverse learners that we're talking about. Being Cuban American, my parents immigrated from Cuba in the 1980, right? And I spoke Spanish until I went to kindergarten to learn, English and everything else. And, my husband who's here today, his background being Haitian man who he'll speak about soon and speaking Creole, we are teaching our children different languages in the home as well. We reside here in West Hartford, so our kids have experienced some of the amazing programs that we have here, and we're very thankful for that. And we look forward to them attending Brayburn very soon. And just my background, I was at Hall as one of the assistant principals for 7 years. I see some of the kids here, hi, that are here with us this evening and their parents. And now I'm at Brayburn Elementary School. And, one of my passions is really bridging that opportunity for students to have that self-agency, right, to create a difference, to be that leader, because I feel with opportunities, achievement follows for our kids, and them, I'm bridging the gap between our high school learners and our elementary school students who have been working together on a lot of new initiatives when I started Brayburn. So it's a wonderful community to live and serve in. So I'm really honored to be here this evening talking on this panel. But I know I can't represent just one community or everyone's narratives or stories, and I don't intend to do that. But when I was asked to speak here about my Cuban American experience, I'm really speaking about my lived experience. And when I'm talking, I'm really seeing the faces of our parents and caregivers in this community that I've served and the children when I'm focusing in on the Hispanic and Latinx and Latina population. In my upbringing, when I would bring any concerns to my family, I was always, told and modeled, there's nothing that can't be fixed, right? So, Cubans are really strong, right? We've endured so much. As long as we didn't have much growing up, right? My parents didn't have much in Cuba, but as long as we had each other, family, fun, laughter, we would be okay. And that's how I was really raised. All of these years, and that was the mindset that was brought up in any experiences that come. I was always reminded, right, how my parents traveled by boat and how they traveled with inmates from Cuba. It's for the land, right, of opportunity for our education, for our growth, our success, and for theirs as well. So if they can endure that, we can endure anything, right, is what I've always been told. And that generational, relationships and strains that happen as, my family has so many ties and connections in Cuba as well as in the United States, and that stressor that can weigh on them as well during that. And, really when I look at how, I can best serve others from the community is building those strong relationships, really. That matters in everything that we do when we're trying to support others and accessing mental health services. In speaking with families of the Hispanic or Latinx or Latina community, building those strong relationships where some of the families will just say, I trust you, whatever you say. I'm not really sure what a counselor really is. I'm not really sure what a social worker is. We didn't have that in my country, I would hear a lot from families. But, as long as you're saying that because we have the relationship, please, help us access those resources. Some other experiences that I've seen as, I started my career as a parent educator, so I would listen and learn a lot from that. As a support staff member and now administrator. So when I would hear some resistance to families accessing mental health or saying that there is a problem, I would hear, oh, is my child saying these things for attention? Is it for fear of, discipline or punishment, or they're making excuses for poor choices? I would hear that from some families, and they were being very honest and open with how they were feeling because we had that connection. Or feeling that maybe their own remedies or spiritual supports, right, pastoral care would be very helpful to help them support their problems. Or some feeling that depression doesn't exist, right? Not having some of these resources in their country to know that they can access the support. And some of the stigma that we would hear behind it too, that, this is an invasion of our privacy if we're asking for, support from others. And, knowing from my culture, talking a lot about, our reputation and, are you representing the family well, or are you representing the family poorly based upon your actions, and how does this impact how we're seen as a family if we're identifying a problem or seeking mental health services. I would hear from some of the families or feeling that they may be judged, based upon how they chose to parent their children. That could be generational, practices or philosophies, or concerns around, if they're seeing a mental health provider that doesn't share the same, upbringing and cultural identity, are they going to try to change who my child is? Hearing those concerns, and I see the faces of the families that I serve when these concerns have come up. But my role as an educator has always been really to educate about what it means to receive services in the school building, outside of the school building, and how you can access those resources and supports. It's really about, getting to know my learners the best possible ways in order to really help them get connected and plugged in. It's about building those relationships with those parents, those caregivers, to make sure that they trust in what we're saying and what we're recommending, and hearing their voice and their concerns as well, because all of you are really important members of our team to really support your child. Other things is really just creating a welcoming and inclusive environment where everyone really feels seen, heard, valued, and supported. And that could look different on every student, and helping them identify a trusted adult in the building, helping parents and caregivers when there's concerns that arise in relation to depression or accessing services, building that trusting relationship with parents and caregivers, so if there's a problem that arises, they can pick up the phone and ask and feel supported and heard by that. And really, if parents have declined support in the past, I think there's still so much that we can do as educators. I have one story. A teacher sent me a text of the student right before I came here, which reminded me of that. Although the family declined services for mental health support, we were able to connect them with the peer mentors from the high school setting, connecting them with adult mentors, right? Jocelyn Tambrella Noble is one of them, connecting them with their teacher or someone that they relate with in the building. And when families have found success in that, then they want to, in turn, maybe think about other resources that we have recommended. So those are some areas of focus as my role as an educator.
Thank you so much, Kim, and for talking about some of the different cultural perspectives. As we know, different cultures view mental health in different capacities. Some cultures don't view it at all, and it is not something that exists or is well understood. Other cultures view it from a more spiritual or a religious perspective. And so there's a lot of different understanding throughout the world of what this means, what it looks like, and how do we treat it. Statistically, Asian Americans have the lowest rate of receiving services, even if the child has depression or mental health, they have the lowest rate of receiving services. And now we're going to go to Jeff. And if Jeff can share some more with us from your professional and personal experience as a clinician about more diverse cultures, about being Black and dealing with mental health issues, and being male and dealing with mental health issues.
Good evening, everyone. So I find it to be somewhat appropriate to kind of put a spin on the 3 to 5 minutes I have with you today. So I'm going to use this as my own personal counseling session, if you don't mind. So all of you can be my counselors as I, in full transparency, tell you a little bit of what I went through in my middle school and high school years and, you know, the impact that it's had on my professional career as a clinical director and why I started my practice in 2016. So first of all, the 13-year-old version of me would be so surprised that I'm even talking to you. I used to be so shy. I was that little, timid, quiet, nerdy boy in the back that nobody paid attention to. And I don't know about you guys, but middle school was hard. Middle school was the toughest time in my life, probably still to this day. If I would say depression is a real thing, that's probably when I felt it the most. I grew up in the era of the M&Ms and the 50 cents, so to be that black male with swag back in the day and like hood and you know, strong, unfortunately, in my middle school years, that wasn't me, you know. My parents are came from Haiti, came to New York to try to start something, and we ended up moving to Stanford. So I was pretty much born and raised in Stanford. And in Stanford, you had to be a part of a gang to feel protection. So my cousins and a few of my older friends, you know, pretty much ran the gang in the community that we lived in. So, you know, you kind of get acclimated to that lifestyle. But for some strange reason, I felt like I was an outlier. I felt like I was going to do something better. I felt like there was more to this life. And, but I still lived it. I still had to go through it. You know, I still had to go through the fights, the bullying, and, you know, the difficulties that my depression gave. And then I had my brother and sister looking up to me. And then my parents, they had to work until 11 p.m. So I had a lot of pressure to succeed and maybe do something more than what I see on a day-to-day as a black male. So what got me out of that? Well, a few things. One, I would honestly say I would give a lot of credit to my school counselor. My school counselor saw something in me. I don't know what it was, but she doubled down on me and she gave me extra attention, more than the average, and I never understood why. Eventually I asked her, when I graduated from high school, why did you choose me? And she was just like, because you were different, you were an outlier. And I remember I was chosen to go to a college tour to UConn and a few other HBCUs, and you know, that opened up my eyes. And I remember going on that campus and I said, one day that will be me. I will be here. And with the many challenges I had to go through as a first generation low income, my mother never graduated from high school. My father went to college for like a semester and dropped out. You know, living a paycheck to paycheck, I had to realize I needed to make a change. So I remember when I was 13, my best friend, and it still sticks to me till this day, I was switching schools, moving to Norwalk, and he said, when you go to Norwalk, don't you ever allow someone else to bully you again. And man, oh man, that stuck with me. That stuck with me. Those words stuck with me because it allowed me to see why I was so sad and depressed and why I was so low, why I didn't have the confidence that I needed as a male. And I said, you know what? I'm going to hold you to that. I'm going to hold myself to that. I remember looking in the mirror and saying, all right, I'm about to start my freshman year. Nobody knows me in this school. I could start a new chapter. So I started changing the way I dressed. You know, I started getting haircuts. You know, 15, I started my first job, so I was able to buy my first Uptowns and Jordans, and, you know, I had a little bit more swagger to me. I was able to triple the amount of friends that I had. I was able to do that while maintaining my straight A status, because my overall goal was to be that kid that went to UConn. Met another school counselor who took me in under her wings, and I just realized, wow, these counselors, they know what they're doing. There's a reason why they keep seeing something in me, you know, and I remember busting and just doing as much stuff to get myself to not only get into UConn, but to also pay for it. I only applied to that one school. And I was able to get 10 scholarships because my counselors believed in me. And I was able to create a network of good friends that protected me from the gang violence that surrounded me on a day-to-day. You know, it wasn't until I got into UConn. See, I went to UConn for engineering. You know, I switched my major 4 times until I finally got it right. I landed on psychology and realized counseling was the biggest impact in my life. And I need to pass that baton to anyone who has the courage to sit on my chair when they enter my office, because it takes a lot to see a counselor and to be as transparent as I am to all of you today, to tell their story to a total stranger and to build rapport and work on their mental health together. So what I would like to end on is, I challenge everyone in this room to share their story to their children and let them know it wasn't all easy. There were some difficult times in middle school and high school, and they don't know it. And when you're able to be transparent to your children, then it will allow them to maybe lower their guard just a little bit so they could truly share what's going on in their educational journey. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jeffrey. It was very enlightening to hear your experience and understand where that's coming from. And we still have Melanie Thomas, who I'm going to ask if you can tell us a little bit more about what the school can do if a child is depressed or is struggling with some mental health issues.
Thank you so much, and thank you everyone for being here. A lot of what I have to say really echoes a lot of what was said already in the room, and everyone is so profound, and I almost feel compelled to tell little pieces of my own story because that's how I got into the profession of school counseling. And it's pretty ironic. I kind of echo a little bit of what Jeff said about, like, like 12-year-old me would be shocked that I'm even talking, like, period. I grew up in a household where we were told to not say anything. Do not talk to anybody about what is going on in this house. Like, rings clear in my head. Mom said it over and over and over. And that's still a part of me now. Like, I'm a very closed individual. I realize that a lot of kids are closed. They don't feel comfortable talking to adults. They don't feel comfortable talking to peers. They don't feel a sense of belonging. And I feel like we have an obligation as professionals to create a sense of belonging, especially for the young kids of color. As a Black woman in this profession, in this district, it is so important. And I connect to it so much. Even earlier today, I was talking to a group of kids, and they're craving that belonging, whether it's connecting to adults, kids, whoever it is. And I feel like those connections are what really opens the door for people to feel comfortable accessing support in the first place. I became a school counselor because my school counselor in high school was a Black man. I saw someone who I connected with. he saw something in me. He encouraged me to apply to colleges. I thought I was going to go to the military. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I didn't know about those options until someone told me about them. And it's because I was able to make an adult connection. So to speak a little bit about what is offered in the school, I'm the supervisor of the school counseling department. Each high school and in the middle schools as well, actually even in elementary schools in West Hartford Public Schools, we do have school counseling teams at all levels. We have freshman counselors who work primarily with freshmen, and then we have the rest of the team works with grades 10 through 12. Each student is assigned to a school counselor, and just to give you a little background about what a school counselor does, they support in career and professional development, social emotional things, and obviously academics and getting to the finish line and graduation. But in between all that, there's a lot of other things that go on in school. And school counselors are there to support those pieces as well. So our department has an open door policy. Like if you're a student and if your son, daughter, or however they identify as feeling like they need to seek support, they can reach out to their school counselor. We also have crisis interventionists at each of the high schools, and they're available on a triage kind of model where if a student is in crisis, they're kind of that first line of contact. And then we kind of assess, like, what's the severity of the situation and what do we need to connect students to in order to get them the level of support and care that they need. Sometimes that support and level of care is at the school level, like Ms. Ambrose was talking about, some of that mentoring piece, some of the connections we make with the school social workers and clinicians. But then there are times where we have to go beyond that and seek support outside in the community, whether that's through like a hospital or outside counseling and therapy and things like that. But it is like kind of on a case-by-case basis. Every student situation is unique. And we treat every student situation seriously. But I kind of want to bring it back to that trust. None of these things can happen if that trust is not established between not only the student and the staff, but families, right? Families have to trust that we're going to take care of your kids. They're your babies, and we have them for the majority of the day throughout the year. So they're in great hands, and we want to continue to keep the doors open for them. And I think what Kim said is super important about kids feeling seen, valued, heard, and supported. Like, that's the mission. Without those pieces in place, all the structures we have don't mean a thing. Like, they gotta walk through the door first. So that's kind of my passion and my mission and kind of what we're about in the school counseling department. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much, Melanie. And as Melanie was just saying, kids needing to be seen, heard, and understood goes back to the trust and belongingness that Melanie was talking about, which goes right into our next slide. Good mental health strategies. These are ways to prevent having poor mental health if somebody is struggling. These are some basic things that you want to make sure each teen is doing. Getting enough sleep. So we know teenagers sleep in late, but then they get up early for school. They don't get enough sleep. It is really important for humans to be able to get enough sleep, for their brain to be able to process, for the various things that they've learned, they've understood, their emotions and feelings need to process. And a lot of that happens in our sleep, in addition to the body changes and grows and repairs itself during sleep. So let your teenagers sleep in because they absolutely do need to get that sleep if they're not getting it during the week. Movement and exercise. This is so important because exercise actually increases the happy hormones and chemicals in the brain. Exercise increases dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, and now I'm blanking on the last one. I'm sorry about that. And oxytocin. So with exercise helps get oxygen into the muscles that then move around, and it gets more oxygen to the brain to help the brain continue to move. Nutrients. If you were to buy a very expensive car, what would you put in it for fuel? You wouldn't put the cheapest fuel in it, you'd put premium fuel in it. These are our bodies, our vessels. So when we are feeding them, you want to feed them the proper nutrients, fruits, vegetables, whole grain, healthy protein that is going to help the child get through the day. It's going to help the child's brain grow. It's going to help the body move the various nutrients around to do the things that it needs to do. Just like you wouldn't give a plant just garbage food, you'd give them the correct food. The same thing happens to the human body. You can either heal it with medicine or you can make it very sick with food. Food can be healing or can be detrimental. So it's really important to make sure that teenagers who have growing bodies are getting proper nutrients. Sunlight. Sunlight produces vitamin D. It's really the best source of vitamin D for humans. We do know that in areas where there's less sunlight during the day, there's actually higher suicide rates in the world. So we understand that sunlight is very important and it produces serotonin. Belonging and connection, as Melanie had said, it is very hard to not feel depressed when you're completely isolated. We want to help kids make connections, feeling like they're belonging to a group, whether they're connected to kids at school, whether they're connected to kids on the internet, whether they're connected to a group, whether they're connected to a teacher, whether they're connected to their family, their church, or other social things. It is so vastly important that all human beings feel a connection. And this connection increases oxytocin, which is another feel-good hormone that is considered the love hormone. We can also get that hormone from being around our pets. So the last few together, if anybody has a pet, have your kids take the pet for a walk. You're gonna be able to get exercise, sunlight, and the oxytocin from the pet. So those are really great things. And last, we have purpose. Having pleasure and happiness increases your endorphins and your serotonin, and achievement increases your dopamine. So when somebody completes something, even small or simple, they can make a checklist of to-do, and each time they check it off, they get a little bit more dopamine. So that's really important because having a purpose and pleasure really helps to deal with depression. And very, very important for all the caregivers out there to keep open communication. There is no better way to help your child than to keep regular, constant, open communication. Let them know they can come to you. Let them know you're not going to punish them. You're not going to judge them. Let them know that you are here to help them, and that means help them through mistakes, help them make healthy choices, help them build and grow even if things aren't exactly as they had hoped or if they make mistakes. Okay, here are some statistics of an average classroom in Connecticut. These statistics were taken in 2019 pre the pandemic, and I'll give you a moment to take a look at them. But what basically it's saying is about 10 students in a group of 30 reported not having good mental health for a week in the past month. And so what we are seeing is about 30% of teens pre the pandemic were really struggling. And there are some other numbers on there that give you a sense of a classroom. On the bottom right, it says 19 students say that they have at least one teacher or an adult in the building they can talk to if they have a problem. 19 out of 30 is good in one perspective. As a social worker, it's not good because what's going on with the other 11, and how do we reach them? How do we connect to them? How do we make sure they're not alone and they do have an adult? Okay, commonly known symptoms of depression: sadness that persists longer than 2 weeks, fatigue, crying, low self-esteem, hopelessness, worthlessness, and loss of interest in things that they once enjoyed. These are some of the more commonly known symptoms of depression. However, depression is not always obvious, especially in teenagers. In fact, some kids go to great lengths to hide the symptoms of depression from the people around them. They may appear happy, even upbeat or bubbly on the outside, but inside, depression symptoms are affecting their feelings, their thoughts, their physical health. Some teens even report leading what they call a double life or faking it. Very often when I am working with a child who does struggle with depression and I reach out to the family in a lot of cases are surprised. But they come down for dinner every night, or I ask them how their day was. Sometimes that's not enough, and we need to really be there for them. Okay, so here are some potential warning signs in childhood. So this could, okay, here are warning signs for teens. Ignoring their phone. That is not a typical teen behavior. That is sometimes a sign or a symptom that a teen might be becoming depressed. Cannot get out of bed. A reduction in hygiene or change in their appearance, change in their behavior, changes in eating habits, sleeping habits, energy. Somebody feeling hopeless or saying that, withdrawal, not socializing anymore, not coming down to eat dinner with families when they used to. Again, substance use and grade slipping, and obviously any kind of self-harm warrants getting another level of support. What is going on in the mind of a person with depression? So they often have intrusive, negative, critical, and sometimes cruel self-talk. Common phrases that a teen might say to themselves or have in their mind is, I'm not good. No one cares about me. I'm worthless. No one cares if I'm alive. I have no friends. I'm stupid. I suck at school. None of these need to be true for the person to believe them. What happens if you hear something over and over again? Anybody? You start to believe it. What if it's in your own voice? You believe it even quicker, even more, and you will start to believe it's absolutely true. So when you hear your voice telling you you're worthless over and over, kids absolutely start to believe that. I have an anonymous poem from somebody in West Hartford that I have permission to read, and it's about depression. Yep, student. It's entitled, Why Me? Why? Cheer up, I hear. all that does is create another tear. I feel alone and scared. For this world, I was not prepared. To deal with the exhaustion and monster in my head, I lie in bed with intrusive thoughts in my head. I'm good at bottling it all inside and keeping it there, a safe place to hide. My life resembles a roller coaster breaking through the life's obstacles poster. The highs and lows of the bumpy ride increase my feelings of being alone and empty inside. And all I can do is sit here and cry and wonder why me, why? It takes superhuman strength just to get up. I don't think I can do it. I want to give up. It is often too hard to get out of bed, and my dad tells me to suck it up. It's all in my head. I don't have the energy and motivation to get dressed and showered. My mom says I'm lazy and treats me like a coward. I feel so much pain in my heart that I want to pull my body apart. Anytime I get the chance to socialize, my depression steals my confidence and I can't mobilize. I use all my energy to hide my depression, and sometimes the pain is so bad that I go numb. I live in fear people will find out. The shame and stigma eat me up from the inside out. After my breakup, my life was shattered. No one seemed to care, as if I never mattered. No one supported me. Like I was kicked on the ground, I became empty. Would my soul ever be found? Thoughts keep telling me that I'm worthless, while the rest of the world continues to make progress. What do I have to look forward to? Thoughts of myself? Who? And all I can do is sit here and cry and wonder why me, why? And that's an image that I meant to have during the poem. So next slide. Okay, so this just sort of demonstrates how when somebody's depressed, their perspective might be a little off and they see things through that lens. Possible causes of depression, there's no individual cause. Could be family conflict, could be a loss of a relationship, a loss of a friendship, a loss of a grandparent, a loss by moving, trauma, bullying, trouble in school, undiagnosed medical conditions. We know that chronic pain produces depression. Also, kids with undiagnosed learning disabilities will often feel like they're not good enough and will also can develop in times into depression. Social media, that is a whole nother topic we can't get fully into, but that is a cause. And then there's the biological and genetic aspects. Okay, what to do if you think your child is depressed? Keep open communication and check in regularly, which is something we had talked about. Talk to your child about sadness and normalize the emotion while offering healthy coping skills. Ask your child if they are having any thoughts of hurting themselves. It is a myth that will put the idea into somebody's head. Saying that does not put the idea in somebody's head, so you can always ask that to somebody that you're worried about. Reach out to the school counselor. We have a lot of supports here in the West Hartford district. Set up a visit with your child's doctor and possibly a therapist. Allow access to coping skills and connections, which sometimes mean when your child gets punished, if their phone is their primary coping skill and connection, try to find alternative ways to consequence or punish them that is not taking away their lifeline. Be patient and kind and enjoy time together. Okay, and we are at the end. We have some resources. that we're going to show. And before then, we're going to go to questions and answers from the audience. Can ask questions to any of the panel members. And go to the next. No, go to the. Okay. Yep. Okay. So those resources are available when you walk out. Does Does anybody have a question they'd like to ask any of the panel members? Does that mean we did such a great job, nobody has any questions, or are people shy? Anybody over here have any questions?
We're also inviting people to stay after if you want to talk to somebody one-on-one.
What if you have a child in your life that you're concerned about a friend or a classmate of their peers' mental health? How would, as an adult in this child's life, how would you want us to advise them?
That is a great question. If a peer comes to a, or if a child comes, if a child comes to a parent with concerns about a peer's mental health, that's something we deal with in school every day. And so what you can do as a parent is support that child to encourage them to go to the school counselor and to report that and be assured that the school is going to take that seriously and deal with it to the extent that it needs to do and follow up with the family. So yes, we don't share where we got that information from, but we reach out to the child to see what's needed and then communicate that with their family. And we do get a lot of referrals this way. There are a lot of kids that text and post a lot of things on social media about not just depression, but suicidal thoughts, and a lot of that does come to the school from peers, and we are able to help a lot of children in that capacity. So we encourage the kids to say something.
And I would just add on to that to say, like you as the person that maybe your child, the trusted adult that your child or another child confided in you, you can also call and speak to the school counselor. Like I had that happen last year. A parent of another kid was concerned about that kid's friend, and they said, hey, I'm just worried. Here's the person's name. Can you check in? And then I followed up with that student's school counselor and just, like Shauna said, just made sure that student was checked in with and had the resources that they need. So there's absolutely nothing wrong with you reaching out, or if the child is comfortable reaching out on the student's behalf, that's completely okay.
Go ahead with your question. Yes. That's a very good question. Some students are very shy, right? And they are, it's hard for them to access that school counseling support, even though we know that every child has a school counselor. What are the mechanisms, right, for them to get help and services? And I was going to mention before with Elizabeth's question, just in terms of that anonymous alert app that we have too. So if you are reporting something and you feel that, you want to remain completely anonymous, you can do that. It's on our West Hartford Public Schools website where you can access that. And there is a reply option where we can go back and forth to get more information as necessary. And also with a very shy student, that is another opportunity for their voice to get heard. Have Melanie further discuss that as a school counselor, department supervisor.
Which I don't know how to plug it back in. There we go. So in terms of the shy students, so we do have mechanisms in place for school counselors to meet with every one of their students at some point throughout the school year. And part of those meetings include some questionnaires at some point. So especially like from the transition to freshman transitions are important, and then the transition from freshman to sophomore year is another big one, where we do ask kind of questions that would help us understand our students a little better. So maybe it's like, what's one thing you're passionate about, or what's one thing you're worried about? How do you feel things are going this year? So we try to get to know students in that capacity, but again, if you're a shy student, sometimes it is just hard to walk through the door. So to that, we just try to create the most welcoming environment possible. Like, we have our clerical staff right out in front who are super, super friendly and really try to take time to understand the student's concern when they come down to the office. But also students can use mechanisms such as email. Like, a lot of students email their school counselors a lot. And then, at that point, maybe they'll set up an appointment or just kind of establish that relationship. But it is kind of a case-by-case basis, but we do kind of, like, we encourage students to just come on down, because the last thing we want to be is like threatening and scary and not welcoming, and that's why we do have that kind of open door policy, just to drop down whenever you need to.
Thank you. We also do, West Hartford is very fortunate to have crisis clinicians in both of the high schools. And so that's just sort of a safe place to drop in. And we often get kids because another kid reported concerns. Sometimes another kid called them down, or often teachers when they're concerned about a student. Students looking down a lot, students looking sad, the student is not keeping up with their homework, maybe their appearance has changed. That then does come to me as the crisis clinician, and I meet with the student and hopefully create a safe and effective environment where they know they can come and they can come back. And again, it's an open door policy. They can come anytime. And so hopefully that builds that trust with that student to be able to return when they are ready to talk.
Okay, so I just want to give you, from a clinical standpoint, sometimes emergencies cannot wait. And I would say to the parent, do not be afraid to call 911, because that might just save that child's life. Sometimes you cannot wait for the next day. I've had plenty of clients tell me, Jeff, my best friend just told me they are about to swallow some pills, and I would say, please talk to your parents immediately, and then have you and your parents call 911, and it could be totally anonymous. So they could do a clinical check. Now, that's usually our go-to. Then I would say your second resource you could use is 211. So 211 is the crisis intervention where they would have a direct social worker come to your house and do a clinical assessment, and if they feel it's warranted that you need to have some type of hospitalization for safety, they will refer that particular student to a hospital. But more importantly, they do wraparound services for that child. So they will stay committed to that case until they transfer that child to either a outpatient clinic or an intensive in-home program, and they would also be collaborating with the school in terms of giving that student some additional resources in the school setting. So just coming from a clinical standpoint, make sure that they're not only getting the services and help in the schools, but also utilize in your community. And I know it's hard to find a counselor nowadays if you tried, but I strongly urge that you continue to call around, call multiple times, send emails, be a nuisance to us, because if we notice it's a case that really needs some attention, I'm that type of counselor that I will bump you up the list to get that client the services that they need to make sure that they're safe.
And again, you can come to the, your school resources when it is on a pretty serious situation. We have ways to get kids in really quickly. So again, try to partner with the school. If you need help, we are here to help. Our only goal is to help your kids and get them whatever they need. Are there any other questions? I don't know if you're going to be able to reach the mic.
You hear me okay? What does it matter whether a child is diagnosed with depression or not? Because a lot of those signs, especially what really hit was the thing about being bubbly on the outside, right? Where these things are invisible. In the end, how much does it matter, really? Because this whole thing was labeled depression, but you have anxiety of other things that could cause a child harm equally. I'm just curious how you see that.
I guess I can start with that. So a label of depression or anxiety or diagnosis is simply that. It's a category in a book, and we as mental health professionals treat people based on their symptoms, not based on their diagnosis. And so whatever the diagnosis is, that sometimes helps to dictate a possible treatment path, or that might help to dictate what direction and medication a psychiatrist or a doctor might prescribe, but the actual diagnosis is not as relevant unless you're trying to get certain legal statuses. So if you're trying to get various accommodations, at that point that diagnosis might matter. But in terms of support for a kid, we are working with that kid's symptoms and how that kid is doing. One kid with depression is going to look totally different than another kid with depression, than another kid with depression. And so it doesn't all fit the same. So we really focus on symptomology and treating the symptoms.
Yeah, I was going to kind of follow up on that just in terms of the diagnosis. And I guess my question sort of is, do you grow out of depression? Or like, I know people have depressive episodes that come and go, but is like a child who's had a depressive episode likely to have that again in their life? Or what can they expect as they grow older? I guess I wonder. I don't know if anyone can answer this, but.
So depression can be circumstantial. It also can be genetic and biological. Often when a child has depression, there is a biological component to it, but sometimes it's circumstantial. Typically, people who do have a biological component can expect that from time to time in their life they may deal with episodes of depression again. They may not be as severe. They also may have much better coping skills later on in life to manage it much better, and they might have learned a lot of tools. Some of them will have taken medication that also manages it. So over time, the episodes of depression can return, but ideally the person each year of their life increases more and more skills and more tools to identify it early and to deal with it with the necessary resources and supports. It can be very hard the first time that a child has depression because they don't know what it is. They don't know what's wrong with them. And so it's hard to get treatment when you don't know once you have a second or third episode, now you know what it is and you know where to go and what to do. Yep. Anybody have any last questions? Oh, we got 2 more. Yes, I think Melanie is going to help answer this question.
So I don't have a statistical answer to that, but I think the answer is yes, because some of those pressing issues are closer and it's like more of the unknown, which does cause anxiety, and kids are probably a little more vocal about it at that point because it's like, oh my God, what do I do? And like, how do I seek support outside of a school setting? Because it's a lot different once you get out of school. Like, you have to kind of seek that support on your own, whereas in K through 12 education, the structures are there and we seek you out often, and then that kind of flips over when you become an adult. In college, there's support out there, but you as the student or as an adult at that point, you have to seek that out. Mom and dad can't call and say, hey, Johnny needs so-and-so, because then the school is going to say, well, Johnny needs to come to the office, not you, right? So that's the main piece, is just kind of making that transition, which is hard and scary for a lot of young people. So I think the anxiety kind of manifests in that fashion, just kind of like having to figure it out and work on those pieces as a young adult. Sure. So if I'm understanding the question correctly, it's just, how does the school counseling department help students be able to recognize when they're feeling either anxious, depressed, and then when is it appropriate for them to seek that support? So a lot of that is covered in the freshman seminar. So in our structures, we do have a series of classroom lessons that kind of introduces students to, hey, what's this high school thing? And I'm speaking from the high school lens because I work with the high schools, but these things also happen at the elementary and middle school levels, just kind of structures that are in place for students to know, like, school counseling exists, number one. What are we here for, number two, and how and when do you seek us out, number three? And all of those things are embedded in a variety of our presentations. So the freshman seminar lessons are a big piece of that, because that's your intro to high school. But then as each year kind of goes on, in 10th grade, we have introductory, either individual one-on-ones with students or small group presentations with students, just to kind of do that introduction over again. And then there's constant communication throughout the school year too. So we have a ton of resources on our Google Classrooms, on our school counseling website. But the real introductory piece is just kind of like what and when. That primarily happens right when the students enter high school. No problem.
Also, a lot of school counselors will then refer somebody to me if they're not quite sure what's going on. and then I can assess them and work with them and figure out what direction we need to go for treatment, follow up with the parents, recommend therapy or what that might be. Sometimes it's a matter of teaching the kids some tools on how to get through. So we do hope to continue this series in the future, with one of the next being around self-harm and suicidality. We also want to have one on anxiety, but I do want to actually, I'm going to give it to Kim to share a couple other things.
Yeah, no, everyone had such great questions, so thank you for that. And to your specific question about how do they know and what are the tools and skills, we do have some QPR, like suicide prevention training through our physical education and health program, and we have our Say Something program too, that's in the phases from the middle school up to the high school level, where we talk about different phases of the warning signs, how to support one another, and how to report it, and how to go to a trusted adult and identify a trusted adult. To your point, so there's a lot of education within the school systems to help students identify any concern areas.
And QPR is a suicide prevention training, question, persuade, refer, and that is a training that is offered throughout West Hartford at various times throughout the year. I'm going to throw a little plug in for the SAVE group. The SAVE group is currently at Conard, but it is welcoming Hall and Conard High School students. And again, this is a group to really help create change in West Hartford, to destigmatize mental health, to increase these conversations, and to create activities for prevention-based things and really bring more awareness to it. And so the SAVE group meets every Monday after school. So if you have kids that might be interested in working in that, please send them in our direction.
I just want to thank everybody for coming out tonight and thank our awesome panelists for sharing everything. There's resources on the table, and feel free to take a cup of hot cocoa for the way, because we have plenty. And thank you for the West Hartford Public Schools for working with Community of Concern. And thank you, Jen Evans with WHCI, for recording this for us. Have a good night.